watch it regardless.
I'm just curious. I want to just dive back in for a second before we move on. So again, you had kind of talked about how, or maybe you told me before we started recording, but you were saying how you got into Bitcoin, but you thought it was just like a tech play. And you were buying it, but you didn't really understand what it was. Your eyes hadn't really been opened up. You hadn't been red pilled, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Like what was it? What was your old view that was wrong? And then how did you come to look at it differently?
I mean, I'll just come back to the, the MySpace Facebook analogy is probably the easiest one. Like, you get into something in technology and the first thing you think of is something better going to come along soon and disrupt this. Right. So you may be an investor in Friendster and then you just get your lunch eaten by MySpace. Yeah. And you think you have the right one because you're at MySpace, but then Facebook comes along and just like destroys you.
So that's actually probably I would say, I mean, at least the top two, not complaints, but objections that I hear is that, but there's 1,000 other cryptos and exactly what you said, Bitcoin's going to be the old MySpace and all those. So how do you look at that now? I'd like
so let me use this. So there's a lot of arguments for why it can only be Bitcoin, but I'll almost even more easily say why it can't be any other one. Because let's say that some altcoin becomes dominant. Why would you stop there? Let's say it becomes dominant because of some feature and people make the argument and it flippens, as they say, if it flippens Bitcoin. Right. Why would you stop there? So now it's Ethereum. Well, why not EOS? Why not some other thing? Why not, Cosmos? Why not whatever? Like there will always be people. So basically this concept of a Schelling point, which is basically where, the second order estimation of what you think other people will think ends up that we all basically think it's the same thing. So it's like, these things exist where you're like, let's meet in New York tomorrow, but you don't give any other information. Like, where would you meet? Right. And, basically the Schelling point is Grand Central Station in the Grand Hall at noon, because that's what most people would think.
Right. So it's like the point there where most people are being concentrated around, which I agree with. But, I think Bitcoin's a little bit different even to that, because like back to the MySpace, Facebook kind of analogy, I can have accounts on both. So like, for example, on Twitter, everyone's moving to like Parler now, but like, there's not that many people on Parler yet. And so like, I don't really want to use it, but I can have an account on both. But with Bitcoin, it's like, you only can really have your money in one place. So it's a little bit different,
Well, you can have investments in other things. Sure. Like there are a lot of people that own a lot more Bitcoin than I do. And even that may understand Bitcoin better than I do and may still have, some gambles because they have, a bet that like in this cycle, they think this altcoin is going to, be higher beta and will go up more than Bitcoin does. And that's fine. That's like their gambling thing, but it's not your savings. Right. It's not your hard money hedge against a financial system that has demonstrated its unbelievable profligacy and lack of restraint over and over and over again, reflating the 2001, .com bust with, mortgages and reflating that with the everything bubble. And now doing it again with essentially like in gold terms, we're in a depression right now.
Yeah.
Let alone in Bitcoin terms.
I also like to think about it like, is really you have to look at like, what are the important characteristics of Bitcoin? Again, like I said, right? Borderless, permissionless, censorship resistant, et cetera. And so for another crypto to come along and beat it at those characteristics. So, okay, it's faster, whatever, right? It's cheaper, whatever. But like in those characteristics that matter, it's like almost impossible. And it was really like Andreas Antonopoulos that kind of gave me this argument. But it's like, when Bitcoin started, nobody knew about it. Nobody cared about it. The government let it go by. And F.A. Hayek, right, Nobel Peace Prize winner, 1974, he said that there will never be a sound money again until we can take it out of the hands of the government, but it has to be done in a sly, roundabout way. That's exactly what Bitcoin did. It was sly. And, today we see like all these attacks on networks and then double spending and all that. And so now if anybody really tried to be decentralized like Bitcoin, it would be attacked and it would just be shut down. It would be almost impossible to ever launch that again. Seems like to me anyway.
Well, I think decentralization is actually the key linchpin of that line of thinking, which is absolutely correct. And it's that Bitcoin was able to grow because nobody paid attention to it. It was able to grow 3 or 4 years at the beginning, completely decentralized. Right. Because everybody was just working on that one. And as soon as people realized, oh my gosh, I can sucker retail investors and VCs into giving me money for my centralized thing, and I can pre-mine it and take 2/3 of it for my treasury, or, you know, set up all these like janky things that fund a foundation and keep me eating for a bunch of years and buy me mansions and houses and private security forces or whatever it is. That's what people are going to do. And not only that, in a noisy space where now the cat's out of the bag, the ICO bubbles happened. If you have a concept for a crypto, Mimblewimble coin or whatever the heck you want to scam people with, you better have a huge marketing budget, and you better have agencies working in Korea and China and Japan and Georgia and Estonia and the UK and the US,
right,
you know, promoting your crypto like Justin Sun style. Or you're going to get your lunch eaten, and you have every incentive to lie about it and to do all kinds of crazy things.
But even that isn't going to save it, because they're never going to achieve the level of decentralization.
That's right. That's why I often talk about the Immaculate Conception. And
right.
Just like, you know, Bitcoin came to be. It was the first one, and the advantages that it has with its beginnings, it has the moral authority that no other coin can have. And it doesn't matter if Satoshi comes back and claims his million coins or sells them or whatever. Like, it actually doesn't matter at this point. He doesn't own shit, right? Because nobody owns it, just like nobody owns the internet.
And it's important for me to understand, or really even convey that point, because to, like you said, right, to achieve that level of decentralization would be almost impossible today. But the level of decentralization is what allows it to be censorship resistant. And on this last video I just did, I got, 1,500 comments, like over 1,000 comments, a lot. And the biggest objection, probably 15, 20 people at least said, oh, but the government's just going to come and kill it, shut it down, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so being that decentralized, censorship resistant is what's so important. How do you view that?
Yeah, so there's two things at work here. One is the protocol layer. And then the second one is the social layer, which is what humans are going to do and what human incentives have been created, right? So, the protocol doesn't make somebody go and hook up a Bitcoin mining facility to hydroelectric power and, bribe a Chinese official to give you that power for free so that you can give hash power to the Bitcoin network. Those are human actions that are being taken because of incentives at the social layer, right? So, the idea that a government could go and shut down the Bitcoin protocol is as ludicrous as like shutting off electricity worldwide. And even then the ledger would survive because it lives on hard disks all over. Like, the Bitcoin ledger doesn't have to be connected to the internet at all times. You could EMP the whole globe. And as soon as you're back online, or as soon as you found another way through smoke signals or whatever to communicate the next block, right, you could keep Bitcoin alive. I'm mostly focused on the social layer, and that's really what, the mission of Swan Bitcoin is all about. Basically the concept of, in the US specifically, which is where we operate, where I live, where I want to keep living, or at least want to have the option to keep living, I don't want the government to take major actions adverse to the growth and eventual success of Bitcoin. Right. I want it to be as smooth as possible for all of us that work in the space, that are early purchasers of Bitcoin and that are holding on to it and helping promote it and helping evangelize and educate people and bring people toward, a bright orange future like you are. Yeah. So that's our goal, basically, is to get 10 million Bitcoiners defined as someone that, owns some bit of Bitcoin that's meaningful to them and is educated and passionate enough to actually argue for it. Whether that means, calling a congressman or attending a town hall meeting or writing a blog post or fighting it out on Twitter or whatever it is, that combination of having some skin in the game and enough knowledge to be a little bit dangerous, those 10 million people would be just over the bar of, what Nassim Taleb would call the intransigent minority, that time and time again in a complex system is enough to flip a society to doing things the way that they want it done.
Yeah, like the tipping point.
It's the tipping point. It's the same as regulatory capture. It's the same as halal meat or all of us eating kosher. Just about every packaged food in the US is kosher because, we're fine with eating kosher if you're a non-Jew, but if you're Jewish, you would only eat kosher. Right. So we all eat kosher.
And now we see, you know, the no hormones in milk, or now we see gluten-free everything or whatever. Yep. So 10 million users, where do you estimate we are right now?
So that combination of both owning a meaningful bit of Bitcoin and actually understanding a decent bit about it, I think that number is around 100,000 people in the US.
We got a long way to go.